I'm Dr. Suzanne Phillips, psychologist and co-chair for community outreach for the American Group Psychotherapy Association.
And I'm Dr. Craig Haen. I'm a drama therapist, and I am Suzanne's co-chair for this committee as well.
Well, generally we respond to traumatic events, critical incidents, and disaster, both nationally and internationally. Not as first responders, but we've come to know that when the smoke clears and the press goes home, people's lives go on with tremendous stress. And what we found is that intervening in the early stages with invitation for people joining networks of support, helping parents with children, and generally helping communities deal with the crisis has been of real value.
We also provide support for therapists who are on the front lines doing group work with populations who are affected, so that they have a listening ear and somebody they can talk to about the impact of the work that they're doing and the direction of the work.
So, for example, after the earthquake in China, we not only used Skype to train therapists and psychologists in China who would intervene with those, of course, the many people, the thousands of people who were affected. Some of our members actually went because they're from China, and they did something that's really important for children. They set up tent schools. We know that in the aftermath of disaster, something that helps children is normalizing the event in any way. They need to hear their parents normalize it. But for these children, and when we saw the pictures, we were just thrilled to see little children smiling and laughing, literally in the middle of a disaster, in orange tent schools, drawing, and really recovering by using the only type of resiliency children have, which is playing with each other, laughing, and being back to school. That's an example of the type of intervention we did. And as Craig said, in the aftermath of Haiti, we set up a panel here and did exactly what Craig said. We connected with both civilian people and clinicians who were receiving family and friends who were Haitian and who were going over themselves to intervene, do psychological first aid, and in some way respond to a tremendous crisis.
And at the heart of all these interventions, of course, what we know is in times of trauma, what strengthens people are the bonds that they have. So groups, communities, families. And so a lot of the work that we do is about strengthening those communal ties so that people don't feel so isolated and alone with their experiences.
We are connected with, and of course associates of, many of our members are dual members of AGPA, the American Group Psychotherapy Association, as well as the International Group Association. And in that way, we sort of have, as they have, the ability to combine resources and respond. They had one of their major meetings in Rome, and it happened to be very soon after the earthquake in Rome. And what that meant is that, and what was so interesting is that even though there were language barriers, with the help of translators, we were still able to communicate with each other, and caregivers, just like any family member or any child, needs to really tell the story of what they've faced. So if you can think about it, caregivers have heard so many stories. They contain a great deal of the real pain and disaster that people have suffered. So they need a place to go. And so here we were in a room packed with people who spoke many different languages because it was international. And from South Africa to those dealing with the Italian earthquake, to those dealing with refugees in Iraq, people talked about the kind of work they did, and they needed to be heard regardless of the language, and somehow people understood each other. But that's the nature of group, too.
And I think in that sense, when we talk about communal bonds, the reaching across country divides creates an international communal bond, a sense that what people are going through in their own countries and in their own cultures is situated within a larger global community.
One of the things that I think is very important in this culture is moderating one's exposure to media, both before an event and after an event. And that has to do both in terms of communities, but if we bring it back to even the family group, people are very concerned about their children, and we suggest to people that before an event happens, let's say a hurricane, that the families sit down, talk about it, make sense of what people are hearing on the news. So often a TV's on nonstop, adults are speaking, and children are picking up the sense of something terrible happening, but they don't quite get it. So as a prevention, we suggest that people sit down with their children, make sense of it. We saw with Hurricane Sandy, when we debriefed people and we met with them in groups, those people who actually explained to children what a hurricane was, they drew pictures, and that we have a family plan, those children really felt a little bit more support and a little less of the overall stress, because to listen to the media is to imagine the worst. They continue to say it. Then after the fact, that's also an important thing to do. Moderate so that children know the fact you've seen the picture 6 times doesn't mean it's going to happen again and we're going to be in crisis again. So moderation of the media, actually in every group we intervene with, is a form of restoring safety and preventing undue trauma.
Children's worlds are so small, and then when the things that happen in nature collide with those worlds, it can be hard for them to understand that they're not immediately in danger. And it helps for parents to reinforce with their children that the things that they can do to feel a sense of safety are the things they do every day. Following the rules of safety on the school bus, looking to the people whose jobs it is to protect them, like the police and firemen. And so I think the message to children is that, yes, things beyond our control can happen, but this is how we gain a sense of safety. And, I think that can be really grounding for kids to know that the regular routines are important, and that's what they're there for.
When we talk about vulnerability to trauma, we say that there are some people who are going to be more vulnerable: the very old, the infirm, those who've suffered from a mental illness, and of course children. And one of the things that we've realized in, again, a culture that's very high tech, is we have, of course, those people, we call them, that they're in the zone of terror. They're waiting on the roof to be rescued. They're trying to get out of the flooded home. And then, remember, we have many people who are connected by proximity, not just geographical proximity, but as I view, let's say, the earthquake in Haiti, or even if I live in Vermont and I have a loved one on the South Shore of Long Island, I see what's going on. So I have emotional proximity. So when people say, well, why would you be upset? You live in Vermont. The fact is, if you have a daughter and her family and your grandchild on the South Shore of Long Island, that's very close proximity. So the other thing that we've realized as an organization is sometimes our outreach spreads farther than we expected in terms of church community, families who have observed their loved ones in harm's way and who also need to tell their story, consider what their resiliency is. People need to make meaning of the symptoms that follow from a traumatic event, and of course disaster really brings forth traumatic events.
One of the hallmarks of group is this sense that I'm not alone with my experiences. And what I'm feeling that feels sometimes shameful, sometimes makes me feel very different from other people, is really universal, that other people can understand that experience. Trauma is tremendously isolating in the sense that people who are impacted, whether by man-made or natural events, they begin to feel, I think the image is like they have the scarlet letter on their head. They walk around and they're that person who was impacted. And so in group, they gain a sense that they can both tell their story, as Suzanne said, have their story heard and witnessed by other people who understand it. And they also see models in the people around them of recovery. Sometimes people are a little farther along in dealing with it, or sometimes people are experiencing a new aspect of that. The other thing I think that we've alluded to is that there's a tremendous outpouring of support in the immediate aftermath of an event, but the effects continue long after everyone goes home. And so I think we've really learned in our outreach that group projects that continue, on the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 year anniversaries can be tremendously powerful because those people feel like they get remembered and their experiences get validated in a way that they might not several months after an event has happened when people have gone about their daily lives. And it's hard for them to return to that daily life. So group is a place to memorialize and honor those experiences.
One of the things, and Craig exactly described the power of group, is that we've sat in groups where sometimes we talk about the fact that eventually want to tell the story of the disaster without it stirring all the survival reactions. And sometimes someone doesn't exactly have the words, but they hear someone else speak and they say, that's it, that's my story, that's what happened, same thing with me. The other thing that you observe that is really important is disaster or trauma creates a sense of helplessness. I couldn't stop the floods. I couldn't save my partner's life. Whatever the loss was, trauma always involves loss, even loss of the way we thought the world worked. So in a group, when someone's able to help someone else, we somehow move them away from that sense of helplessness. I may not be able to save my house, but if I could tell you a good way to relax, or that you should exercise, or that your child will be okay, because I have a child of a similar age, and when I told him or her about it and we played it out, it helped. That sense of altruism, of helping someone else, is very, very restorative. And as Craig says, all those components happen in a group. One of the things we've learned, that whether you are a survivor, a caregiver, an adult, or a child, nobody needs to heal alone from trauma. That is, in a group, people heal. In community, people heal. The best restoration of what was before the trauma is connection with other people.
I think we all know the phrase, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think what people discover in group is, though it takes tremendous courage to walk into a room of other people who've experienced what you have and to open your mouth and speak your story, I think people find that when they do that, they walk away feeling inherently stronger.